Wise Wednesdays started on April 1st with a humble episode on forgiveness. Between then and now, we've had heart-led conversations on happiness, stress management, relationships, resilience, public speaking, respecting boundaries, self-discovery, mindset, just being, listening, reclaiming your life, intuition, and even food. I would like to thank all my listeners and the guests who gave me their time and trust. It is because of you that we kept going. It is because of you that we kept growing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so, so much for joining me on episode 87 of Wise Wednesdays with RK. Why am I grinning, smiling ear to ear? Because my guest today is the Carol Talbot. She is the founder and creator of the Possibilities Hub. She's a keynote speaker, NLP master trainer, a firewalk instructor, master firewalk instructor. And above all, she's the reason why I got drawn into NLP, why I got fascinated by this world of words and how it changes the way we behave. So without further ado, I bring to you Carol.
And thank you, thank you, thank you. I am laughing at your introduction because I so remember, Ruqya, we got you standing on a table actually to find your voice. So many years ago, we had you in a hotel standing on a table. Louder, louder, louder. And here you are, episode 87. Did you say it's 87?
Yes, it's 87. 87 weeks of showing up daily. Yes, 87. Wow.
Okay, well, in numerology, that would break down into 6, and it's a 6-year, and then it's a kind of like 6 energy in the show as well.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And to have you on the show is truly an honor. I am so happy and grateful that you said yes, Carol. Thank you. So as we start off, the topic you chose to speak on is unlocking the genius in you. So what does genius even mean to you?
To me, I believe we are all genius. We've just been dumbed down really a little, and some people a lot. I don't know whether you've ever read, there's a series of books called The Lives of the Masters of the Far East. And it was to do with an expedition in the late 1800s with about 11 people on that expedition. And they were very interested in meeting the masters of the Far East who could do extraordinary things like walk across water, create bountiful feasts out of nothing. And it's meant to be a true, the books are meant to be based on fact and the journeys of these 11 people. And when I read books like that, you know, you kind of think, well, are those things that are just for the masters, that are just for the few? And there's a part of you that always says, well, if they can do it, why can't I? And as you know, I think one of the first times I ever met you was when we discussed you doing an article on firewalking and coming on the firewalk. And I'm often asked, Carol, why do you run firewalks? Is it just a kind of like rah experience? And it is, you know, a fun experience. However, it's one of those what I call rock your world kind of experiences, because when people come, that's impossible. When we ask them to sign the waiver, it's like, I'm definitely not going to do it. I'm just here to watch. And we say, well, sign the waiver anyway, because you may change your mind. And of course, something happens, you know, in that run up to the firewalk as those beautiful flames and coals dance around and die down. And literally within a few short hours, people are walking back and forth across those coals completely unharmed. And that begs the question, if you can do that, what else can you do in your life where you have been taught that's impossible, that can never happen? And even if we look at the genius that we have available to us right now. Just imagine for a moment, there's billions of neurons constantly wiring and firing in different directions inside of you. How do you align those neurons and all those wirings and firings so that they're aligned with your vision, your mission, and being more? And that again encompasses understanding that we have a brain, we have a heart intelligence as well. So I think it was in the early 1990s or 80s, they discovered the brain within the heart. Now, of course, it doesn't look like the brain in the head, it wouldn't fit. But they did identify that the heart has specific types of cells that mean that it has intelligence. And then you even look back to, say, ancient Egypt in the mummification process. They actually discarded the brain as worthless, but always made sure the body was intact with the heart. And we know that the electromagnetic field from the heart far exceeds the electromagnetic field of the brain. Because, if you walk into a room, you get a good vibe or a bad vibe. So all organisms read energy. So you almost make an entrance before you've entered the room with your energy, your vibe, so to speak. Then there's gut intelligence. So if you look at, I think there was the leader of or the head of a company in Japan, and he always said if he had an important decision to make, he'd do a little tea ceremony. And when he drank the tea, if it kind of settled well in his gut, it was a good decision. And if it didn't, then he didn't go ahead. He didn't sign the agreement. And then you have even cell intelligence. So although we're made up of billions and billions of different types of cells, even a single cell has the ability to repair itself in unforeseen difficulties. Our healing abilities are magnificent, except we don't tend to hear of those. When people heal themselves, it's seen as, not the norm. It's seen as, oh, it must be a miracle and that can't happen for everyone. So our cells, hold the blueprint for who we are physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, which means as you learn more about who you really are, the magnificence, the brilliance that you are, your cells are constantly being upgraded. So all that's happening in one person. And then you think about all the people that you surround yourself with on a regular basis and tapping into their energy and all the knowledge and experience and neurons wiring and firing that they have, particularly if you work in an organization with a team. My goodness, what genius we have available to us.
True. So true. And but I like what you said about the genius within. And unfortunately, some of us don't really get to know who we are because we're so tainted with the conditioning that's going on, growing up with parents, with caretakers, with teachers, everyone telling us who to be. Somewhere along the line, we forget who we actually are. So how do you then figure out who you are?
Yes, a very good question. And I'm totally aligned with what you say. I always say from the moment we're born, we're given a name, we're born into a specific religion, and we're taught the rituals and rites of that religion. We're told we're in a country with boundaries and societal rules. We're then sent to school, and we are taught a history. And I say this purposely, we're taught a history that may or may not be true. And then we're tested on that history to make sure that we get it right. And if you think about school, I don't know what school's like now. I don't have children, but I remember learning about arable farming in northern Spain. And I could say with my hand on my heart, I've never really had to know or utilize and know about arable farming in northern Spain. What was the purpose? Was the real purpose just to tell us to sit there and that somebody else is in charge and we're to listen and learn from what they say and repeat by rote? And if you repeat by rote and are tested on it and get it right, you're the star of the class. And if you don't, you're the dunce and you're ostracized. So if you think about those programmings, that programming is set very, very early on. And even when we go to work, most people have a workspace, maybe a cubicle, and we're taught that somebody else is in charge and it's not us, and that we have to do as we're told, whether we like it or not. So, we think we're free, but we're very much held in a boundary condition. It's like the old adage of, a bird in a cage, and then you put it into an aviary and it thinks, oh, wow, this is freedom, but it's just a bigger cage. So this is starting to learn to question and also start breaking free of the conditioning of who we believe ourselves to be. So again, I go back to, when people ask me, why do you teach things like firewalking? Because when people come to an experience like that, first of all, most of us, when we go to any learning experience, it's like, yeah, I know what she's going to say. I know how this works. You give people the objectives, the big picture, and it's like they've already filled in the details. Yet the most important things we ever learn are taught from the smallest, finest distinction, and then they expand out rather than giving you the big picture and it comes in. So if you think about when we're a child, we learn the A, B, C, the alphabet, and then we discover that when we put those letters together, we can create words. And then from words, we can create a sentence. From a sentence, we can create a story, then a book, then a movie. I mean, it just expands and expands and expands. So going back to the things like the firewalk is when you come, most of us operate from a set menu of we have thousands of words at our disposal, but actually we'll use the same 100 words on a regular basis. We also operate from the same emotions and the same way we behave and respond in situations. So actually, we just got a little set menu. And when people come to a training or a learning experience, they respond and react based on their set menu. But when you push people, way out of their comfort zone, they've got no neurons wiring and firing, nothing on their set menu that says, well, how do I respond and react in this situation? So what it does is it creates new neurological connections, new neurons wiring and firing in a different way that starts to get you to question and realize that you are more than you think you are. You're always more than you think you are. So are you limiting yourself through your thinking? And so back to your question of, how do you discover more of who you are? Literally by discovering, by being curious, by asking questions. I mean, look at children. You've got two beautiful children.
Yes.
Oh, I still remember Ada on our course. She was such a superstar on the NLP practitioner, such a superstar, one of our youngest delegates, and literally took to it like a duck to water, particularly in strategies. She just picked it up like that. But, children go through that stage where they're always, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why? They ask questions, because they go through tremendous growth. And if you think about it, there's two sides of the equation. We're either growing, or if we're not growing, we're on the decline. And everything in this world is either growing or dying. So it's about maintaining that curiosity rather than saying, society says I have to be like this, I have to be like this, I have to be like this. Because I remember even at school, at birthdays or Christmas or special occasions, there was a kind of gift or present that we all wanted. It was the fashionable gift. And you even think of fashion. We all like to, oh, that's the latest thing, I must have that. So we're taught to kind of conform and look the same. And that causes such a lot of stress for people. And there becomes a certain liberation when you choose to be who you are. And I'm reminded of, you've probably heard, and many people will have heard of David Icke. And he's often put in the pigeonhole of a conspiracy theorist. You'll love him or you'll hate him. But there is a very good lesson that he shares, because in England, he was a very, very famous and respected sports commentator. And then something happened and he had a huge awakening, and he wasn't searching for it. It happened out of the blue. And he went on a couple of TV shows, and his words were misconstrued. They were taken out of context, and he was ridiculed mercilessly. Not only was he ridiculed, but his children were ridiculed, his wife was ridiculed. They were very popular, obviously, before that. They got ridiculed mercilessly. And if you ask him now about that experience, he'll say it was a gift, because now he doesn't care what other people think or say. He speaks his truth, and he always says it may resonate with you, it may not. Do your own research, and he's done extensive research. But by being ridiculed, it freed him. It freed him in a way that most of us are not free, because we fear judgment of others. We fear looking different. So a part of us wants to be unique, yet a part of us wants to conform. So we feel in that cage of, how can I be who I truly am? And that's part of the discovery when you decide to really look within, to spend that journey within. And, I was given a metaphor that I absolutely love by a dear friend of mine, and somebody that I've interviewed quite a few times now. And he said, do you know the difference if I talk about the difference between a butterfly and a snake? And I said, I think I do, but let me just share. And I really liked this metaphor, because we all know, the caterpillar eats and eats and eats and eats and eats, then turns upside down, goes into a cocoon and transforms almost magically into something completely different, into the butterfly. But to a large degree, it's an unconscious process, yet that potential is within their cells. The snake sheds its skin and it moves on. It doesn't look back and go, let me take that skin with me, because I might need it again in the future, or I'll just take part of it with me. And Ruqya, I see this so much with people going on peak experiences, whether it's fire walking, whether it's silent retreats, whether it's plant medicine, but going back again and again and again for these peak experiences, because they don't integrate. So they have these peak experiences, but then they get, I need to conform into society. So they grab the old skin, the old story, and put it back on again, and wonder why they're in this perpetual loop, and that they can't quite shed the skin. And we get glued to that story, well, my parents were this, or I had that when I was young, and we get glued to this story. I don't know whether you remember in one of the programs you came on with us, the end part of that story was the breakthrough sessions. Yes. And everybody has to do a detailed personal history. And then we hand the detailed personal history to their master prac, who's going to take them through a breakthrough experience. Yes. And what you may not know, Ruqya, is that we get lots of master pracs coming up and saying, Carol, I can't work with this person. Have you read their detailed personal history? I mean, look, what they've been through. And I always said to people, think of it as a story. Some people, it's adventure. Some people, it's a horror story. Some people, it's very dramatic. But, we all want to drag our story around with us. And if ever there were a time to change the story, to break through of what we've been taught, and discover the genius, the brilliance that you really are. Now is that time to do it. It's not just for the masters of the Far East who could create feasts, who could create beautiful, castles in the mountains. We all have this ability and we've forgotten. And yet deep down, there's that beautiful whisper inside of us, that drive that says, there's more, there's more. And you know that
I know
because
that.
something drove you to find your voice. I mean,
Yep.
you were a gifted and still are a very gifted and talented writer. And yet you transform not just writing, but to go out and share your voice with many others and be an inspiration. So deep in your heart, there was that calling, that whisper that said, there's more, there's more.
And I do remember the breakthrough. Oh God, I wasn't budging. Poor Nishi, having such a tough time with me. And I remember writing my history, and that one line that jumped out for Wendy, where she read, I wrote, "Everyone treats me like a doormat." And I've spoken of this so many times, where I was asked to lie down on my stomach, and she wiped her feet on my back and she said, "Is this how you want people to treat you?" Yes, you weren't in the room then. Is this how you want people to treat you? And that's when I lied down and I just continued to cry. That was my moment of realization that, my God, this is what I'm letting people do to me. And then she asked, "Are you just going to lie down there and cry?" And I said, "Can I sit up?" And she said, "After so many days of working with us, basic practitioner, master practitioner, if you're still going to ask me,
You're
can I
still
sit
asking
up?"
for permission to be
Exactly.
you.
And that was that, and that's when you walked in, and then we had that whole stand on the table and find your voice. That breakthrough led me to do my TEDx talk, Carol. The very next year, I think in a few months, actually, not even the next year, in a few months, I did my TEDx talk. I got the opportunity. I said yes to it. And then the Smile was created. And I'm now known as the Smile strategist. Who would have thought? I do mindset
I
work.
would have thought. Do you not think that, Wendy and I saw that in you? And I see it in so many people. And, the voice is a big thing as well, because, often when we're asked to sing, people say, "Oh, I can't sing," but you have a voice. And,
Yes.
when you ask people to tone, they go, and it's like the liberation when you can go, the liberation we all get when we're singing loudly in the car to our favorite song. Is that not liberating?
Yes.
And yet, we mustn't be rude. I was brought up with the mantra, children should be seen and not heard. Now, can you imagine what that does? And of course, then we all love to blame our childhood, our parents, our friends. We get triggered here and there. And like you, we allow people to trigger us, and we blame them. And yet every time you are triggered is an opportunity for self-awareness. Because when you're triggered and you want to blame other people, when you bring it back to yourself and say, what is it about that triggers me? Then starts to come the self-awareness of who you truly are. Because as I said, we can spend our whole life in the blame game. And let's face it, that's nice to say, it's not me, but you
It's
end up
easier.
powerless. You end up powerless. And like you found, letting everybody wipe their feet on you and accepting it. So, it's a good thing when you get triggered, when somebody pushes those buttons, and parents are particularly good at that. Uh, because it's an opportunity for self-awareness, to discover what is it that's really triggered in me. Let me just give you an example, because often people don't get that. That what you see in others is always a reflection of you. So there's a wonderful book by, I think, Gary Renard. He's to do with the Course of Miracles work. And his book is called The Disappearance of the Universe. And so the premise is there's nothing out there. There's no one out there. That everyone and everything is a manifestation of your thoughts. And this is the importance of mastering your mind. A book I highly recommend is The Master Key. It's a very old book. You can get it for free on the internet, but it's called The Master Key. It was originally in the 1920s, a 24-week course. But it's very, very good for understanding, it starts with mastering your mind. But going back to what you see in others is a reflection of you. You've heard me say this example, that if you see somebody that, you're saying, well, I give and I give and I give, and all they do is take, and that's what I see in them. So how does that reflect back to me? I'm not a taker. And this is a very common one. Well, switch that round. So the person that you perceive is take, ask yourself, what are they good at? If you're good at what you perceive as taking, you're good at receiving. Now flip that back to yourself. The person who's taking is actually good at receiving. Now reflect that back to yourself. Maybe you're not so good at receiving. And maybe that's why you get triggered, that they're take, because they're open to receiving, but you're not. So there's your lesson. And I know people who are big givers, and to receive is really challenging for them, to be in that place of vulnerability. And I know that story myself, to be vulnerable, to ask for help. Particularly if you work in the field of personal development, we all want to be seen to, I've got it all, I've got this, I've got that, look at me. And really, that's not it. Unfortunately, this is the culture we've created, that we live in a sort of me. How many pictures of myself can I post on Facebook and Instagram? And it's about me. And look at me, I'm brilliant. And it's always, there's more layers to the onion. And I share this as no matter how old you get, there's always more layers to the onion. And my calling is always to be the best that I can possibly be. So, when you're happy, most of our growth doesn't come in the happy. It comes with the downs, the ups, and that's life. But the beautiful thing is, on the downs, you can always remind yourself, nothing lasts. Things change. We grow, we evolve, situations change, and I can look back, and maybe you can, to some of the situations in your life which at the time seemed the worst. But actually, when you look back, they were pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that when you put the jigsaw puzzle together, it's just beautiful.
Yes, it is. October 2017 was that phase for me where everything kind of went dark. The kids left for university. I lost Papa, and I struggled not knowing what to do. And it was my coaches, I had amazing people who would step in as light and share and listen. Sometimes that's all you really need, for someone who would listen to you when you're going through a struggle. And my son asked me this very interesting question about accountability a few months down the line, when he realized his mom is still not speaking, coaching, writing, not doing anything. He said, so Ma, what about accountability? And that made me think back. And when I came back from Australia, I started doing my daily videos. And Carol, today is day 1346 of that commitment, day after day. Yes, isn't that fascinating?
Wow. I mean, what an accomplishment to literally, get the camera out, whether you feel like it or not. You feel accountable, you have an obligation, people are waiting to hear from you. And this is about choices, because, we can have bad experiences, and we do have bad experiences. So think of it like a buffet. And we all know, particularly here in this part of the world, in Dubai, the massive buffets.
Ooh, yes.
But what happens when you go and pick something from the buffet and you taste it and you don't like it? Do you have to go back and pick the same thing again? No, there's a whole buffet to choose from. And, I remember once one client, very, very attractive young woman. And she hadn't been in a relationship for a long time. And she was telling me that, she used to have the most amazing relationships and had met some really incredible people. But one relationship, she said, look, Carol, she said, I knew it wasn't right. And I went with it and I got hurt. She allowed herself to be hurt and going against her intuition. And look, our intuition is such a gift and we forget to listen to it.
Yes.
And, I felt sorry for her because, she tasted something from the buffet that wasn't nice. And because she'd had something that wasn't nice, she wasn't going back to the buffet to sample anything else from the buffet. So when you think of life like a big buffet, that everything and anything is possible, then you don't have to taste the same thing twice. If it didn't taste nice, you can choose something different. And you made that choice. You chose, this isn't where the space and place that I want to continue.
Yes.
And here's something else that you did. You decided to be of service.
Exactly.
And, the quickest way to help yourself is to help others, to be of service and to share, not knowing sometimes whether anybody else is listening. But even if one person, sometimes when I'm doing keynotes, sometimes after a keynote, you're whisked away afterwards, or in particular, webinars these days. I remember being invited to do a webinar, and I just hadn't registered the difference between doing a live and a webinar. So although the webinar was live, with a webinar, as soon as they click, I was expecting to see hundreds of people because there were a lot registered on the screen. All I saw was me, nobody. And it threw me for a second because I had to speak to me the whole time. So sometimes you don't get that feedback.
Yep.
And I know sometimes even in a live training or live experience and keynote, I've been, as soon as I come off stage, whisked away off to do something else. And so you don't know how it's landed.
Yep.
And my hope, my wish, my dream is that if it switched on one light bulb for someone,
Yes.
if it made someone go and think a little bit differently, or I'm going to read that book, or I'm just going to research something on the internet. This is sometimes years later, somebody will send you a message and say, you said, I used to teach yoga many, many years ago. And sometimes, literally, I think just the other year, and I haven't taught for some time, I got a message on Facebook Messenger, and it said, I want to thank you because of you and your classes and how much I enjoyed them. I went and did my yoga teacher's training. This is like years later. And so, we have no idea how many people we've touched. And this is the beauty of bringing it back to yourself and realizing that we all have a gift. So, for example, Ruqya, what happens when you smile at somebody? They smile back, right?
They smile back. Yes.
And if somebody smiles at you, the natural reaction is to smile.
Yep.
Because we're hardwired that way. That's the way your neurons wire and fire together. So even a simple smile can make somebody's day. And, so do you have an opportunity to lift the hearts and make somebody else smile? Yes, and you have no idea whether that could make their day or not.
Yep.
So we have more power than we realize to impact other people. What do they say? They say the biggest of bonfires is started with a single spark. And maybe that spark is just a simple smile. So it does all start with you acknowledging that brilliance, that genius that you are to change your life and impact others in magnificent ways.
True. Just going to let that settle in. That was beautiful, Carol. Thank you. Thank you. Ah, let's just look at the comments coming in, because yes, they have been, and let's acknowledge everybody for the time they're giving us. We've got Vidya watching, we've got Rahil, Mirza, Adam, Asma, and who else? Matt, as, as well. We've got some questions here. So Vidya says, it is often the tug of war between the me and the relationships I am in. Why so?
Okay, so it's a tug of war between yourself and the relationships you're in. This comes down to realizing that you have more power. You are that genius over other people. And going back to that book I said, The Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard, sometimes we say he does that, she does that, and you get triggered, going back to being triggered. What if, I'm trying to think of the person who gave this beautiful example. Whether you believe in reincarnation or not, and I do, think of it like when you come into this lifetime, you come in with certain things that maybe you want to learn or embody or understand. So let's say you're at the bus stop waiting to come into this lifetime, and you're chatting to some of the others and say, what are you coming in for? And they turn and say, what are you coming in for? And you say, well, one of the biggest things that I need to learn is about forgiveness. And you then look at everybody else and say, oh, I don't suppose any of you would play, the bad guy role. So something really, really huge that I have to forgive. And everybody goes silent. Nobody wants to play that role. And then somebody puts up their hand and says, okay, I'll do it, because I also need to learn about self-forgiveness. And then as we come into this lifetime, down comes the veil of forgetting. And so when people act out those roles, whether in relationships, we forget that there was maybe an agreement that was made. So if you look at people as just playing their part very well, again, bring it back to yourself. What is it triggering in you? And that's the beauty of when you change, other people change. Because if you're triggered by something, you can't change if somebody looks at you in a particular way and you feel bad. You can't change the way they look at you. What you can change is your conditioned response, the way you respond to it. And as you know, we have lots of quick change techniques within the NLP toolbox and a lot of the other work that I do to make those shifts and changes. And I'm reminded of, and this is just a simple example, with one person telling me, she said, oh, Carol, she said, it's such a chore every morning to get my son out of bed. Every morning to get him up. It's such a chore. It's really hard work. I always have to sort of pull him out and get him dressed, and it's just hard work. So I said, how do you get up in the morning? I mean, do you leap out of bed and greet the day? And she said, no. I said, so it starts with you. Now, she came back the following weekend to me and she said, it's like a miracle. It's a miracle, she said, because she said, I did exactly what you said. She said, I set the alarm, but instead of like, hit the snooze button, she said, I leapt out of the day. And here's a nice thing to say when you wake up in the morning. Something brilliant is happening to me today. Now, not to say, oh, something brilliant is happening to me today. Really say it with conviction. Something wonderful is happening to me today. And say it at least a couple of times. And when you say it with conviction, I can guarantee you'll notice something brilliant that happens to you. But what she said was, because she leapt out of bed with joy and glee, when she went to get her son up, she said he was already out of bed and getting dressed himself. She couldn't believe it. So, I'm not saying this works in every situation, but here's what I'm saying. It does work when you change, others change, because really they are a reflection of you. And another example, I said that, parents are absolutely brilliant for pushing those triggers and buttons because they created them. So, what do they say? If you want to know how enlightened you are, spend a week with your parents. Well, I hadn't seen my mother for 2 years. She's 90 years old. She was 90 last year. And I ended up meeting her in Spain, where she goes. We have a place in Spain. So she went there with my brother. And I was able to get there quite easily without quarantining. And it was so beautiful. I just enjoyed the 2 weeks with her and my brother. And honestly, I cannot remember the last time I spent time with my mother and brother like that, all of the three of us together. And I can honestly say I didn't feel triggered. Now, I did see my brother triggered, and quite frankly, I wasn't surprised because I could see my mother pushing some buttons there. And it was nice at times to be that observer. And this is what happens when you bring yourself into stillness, because we're so busy going here, 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 here. I often say that, because we're so busy doing, it's like all the wonderful things that could happen to you cannot find you, because like there's a brilliant thing waiting to happen to you, but it's like, oh, there she is. Oh, she's moved. They can't find her. There's something wonderful to be in that space of stillness, stasis, balance. And I never understood that for a long, long time, because I'm a doer. I like to be busy, busy, busy. And to have that still mind. I had three wonderful people mentoring with me on meditation recently, very young, 24, 28, and 32. And I wish I'd had that awareness when I was that young. They were such a joy, Ruqya. And after each, wasn't meditation, we were doing different, maybe breath techniques, toning, sounding, all sorts of different techniques. And they'd share what they'd seen, what they'd heard, what they felt. But there was one time when they said nothing. It's completely still and silent. And the no thing, nothing, no thing is everything. So making time to come into stillness. So to go back to the question, was it Vidya asked, was literally look to yourself, change your response. The quickest way to change somebody else is to change the way you choose. You choose to respond and react. Yeah. And that does take practice, because, everything hits the unconscious level first, and we respond and react based on the programs and patterns we've got stored there, like a computer. It's like a hard drive. So, when you say, I'm going to change, I'm going to change, I'm going to change, and then bush, that button gets pressed. It's like, poof, you respond and react immediately. So this is the stillness and starting to become aware of who you really are.
True that. So how do you actually break the silence then, break the pattern then? So we are individuals with a pattern, with the way we behave. So how do you consciously break that pattern?
It starts by first recognizing those programs and patterns. And as I said, the quickest way is noticing who or what triggers you. Once you see what triggers you, you'll start to recognize the patterns that you're operating from. And this is often the beauty of working with a mentor or being in small groups, to develop, the evolution of a different perspective, to expand your awareness, to begin to see things from a different viewpoint. Because, it's a little, we can use a mirror, but it's really difficult to kind of like see your own backside. And often other people can see and hold up the mirror for you. So once you become aware, of those programs and patterns, sometimes in the awareness, they change. You can change them or install new patterns. But it starts with that awareness. And the biggest way to do that is look at your outside world. It's a reflection of your inner world. My next podcast, I decided my January podcast would be the big cleanse. And when I say the big cleanse, this is, physically, cleaning your physical body, but also cleaning your physical space. There's nothing more cathartic than, throwing away old paper, clothes, things that you no longer. It's so cathartic to see the cupboard looking clean, but you need to clean your body. You need to clean your mind. Have you got, mental, you running the same thoughts? It's like, the old vinyl records, are they stuck in a groove? The emotions. So going back to looking at your menu card, are you operating from the same menu? And it's often our friends who see and listen that it's the same words, that you have certain patterns that you use that we often can't see for ourselves. So noticing whether what you're doing is moving you forward or moving in the other direction. If you're moving in the other direction, not where you want to be, then it's time for the big cleanse.
Yes, it definitely is.
And there's many ways to do that.
True. So we have a question here by Ibn Adam. He says, how to be a positive-minded person, even if someone has failed to do something many times. So someone who's had so many failures, how do you grow to be a positive person then?
Okay, I'd actually seen that question and I was scrolling up to see it again because I wanted to address that problem. So I'm glad you found that one, and thank you. One of the frames that I work with is there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. And if you view it from that perspective, what you have discovered are all the ways not to get the result that you want. So think of it like if you were looking for a needle in a haystack, it's going to take a long time going through all that hay. But the quickest way to find the needle is to burn all the hay. When you get rid of all the hay, what's left? The needle. So what you're doing is finding all the ways not to get the result that you want. So it's, again, there's no such thing as failure. There's feedback that what you're doing isn't getting you the results that you want. So change, shift, do something different. So ask other people. Find yourself a role model. It's really good. Find somebody who's done what you want to be able to do. Many of us look at what goes wrong. Modeling excellence is finding who's doing something brilliantly. And remember, this is about unlocking the genius in you. And sometimes to unlock the genius in you, you need to find somebody else who's doing something brilliant. And it's not just doing the same as them. It's also understanding what beliefs are they operating from? What values are they operating from? What language patterns do they use on a regular basis? As well as what are they physically doing? If you want to be a champion golfer, then of course there's certain, there's a certain physiology, but there's also certain thinking patterns that go along with that. So, the unfortunate thing here is that when we don't get the result that we want, a number of times we come up with reasons and excuses. But the fact is, we're still playing the blame game. It's about jumping back into the driver's seat. And, there's a time delay in the reality, the holographic reality that we are playing in. There is a time delay and there's duality. So just think, if you had a thought and it manifested instantly, you'd soon tidy up your thinking, because you'd have a thought and go, oh, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. So most of us do not realize that back in the day, there are some thoughts that are creating your reality in the now. And this is the book I recommend for this is The Master Key. It's by Charles F. Harnell, and Harnell is Harnell. AANEL. And you can find it to download free on the internet. It's not a heavy read, but it'll become your Bible. Because here's the thing, a lot of people talk about heart intelligence, gut intelligence, and I've talked about these. And when I talk about your thoughts, I'm not talking about your brain. But honestly, if you cannot master your mind, it starts with mastering your mind, because this is how we communicate with the universe and the universal mind. This is how we understand the genius that we are. There's a guy who's come on the scene fairly recently. He's called R.J. Spina. And Spina is spelled Spina. And he was very aware, yet he went through some very major physical challenges, such that he was a paraplegic from the chest downwards. He couldn't move. He was diabetic and all sorts of things. But he knew he had the power, the mind, the thoughts that could heal him. Because we are not our thoughts, we are not our physical form. We are the observer of our thoughts. We are the observer of our physical form. And look, if we cut our hand, we don't think anything of it, because we know, if we have a scratch there, it'll be gone next week, because our skin renews itself. Our body has intelligence. We bite into an apple, your body has the intelligence to release saliva. It knows to release digestive juices, what to absorb from the apple, what to discard. So he heard the doctor's prognosis and he shut his door to everybody. He also asked his friends not to visit, and that if they wanted an update, to reach out to his partner, because he didn't want to be disturbed by anybody. Oh, how are you doing? Oh, you don't look so well today. He didn't want any of that. And he said he didn't waver. In 1 month, he was able to move some toes on his foot. In 3 months, he was walking. Now, we say this is not possible, or, unfortunately, society tends to, and the medical profession, allopathic medicine particularly, focuses on what's wrong rather than what's right. It doesn't focus on all the people who've healed, all the people who, and sadly, with healing, that we've been told that it's not possible. Yet there's another person, she was called Colette, can't remember her certain name, and she's passed over now. But she did amazing healing to the point where, and it reminds me of timeline therapy, actually, some of the way that she does it, Ruqya, and it was documented. One of her clients had lost his leg. It took some time, but he grew it back. And we think this can't happen because people say, oh, no, that's not possible. So, you may have experienced a number of times, which you call failure, but actually reframe that. You've discovered ways not to get the results that you want. So now it's time to change your thinking patterns and start discovering ways to get the results that you want. So that book I recommended, The Master Key, also on my website, thepossibilityhub.com, there's a free 11-day mind power challenge. And the lessons are 5 to 10 minutes, and they're really easy to do. And I can tell you they work. Even that mantra, when you wake up in the morning, please say, something brilliant is happening to me today, but say it with not something brilliant is happening to me today, maybe, it might. Just say it with conviction. Again, we talked about the power of the voice, finding your voice. So as loudly, something brilliant is happening to me today. And then please come back, share with us. Even staying with that, you'll find tremendous results.
Absolutely. Gosh, this feels, I could go on talking with you forever.
Oh, don't get me started, Ruqya. You know, I so enjoy this, and I enjoy these conversations. And you know, here's another thing. I used to be, and maybe you had this when you first sort of when you do a TEDx, as you know, because you've only got a certain amount of time to speak, and you have to time it exactly, and you can't be a minute over, minute under. So I remember I used to be so well prepared in terms of, you know, oh, what shall I say? What shall I say? But you know, when you have a conversation with people, this is the beauty of being present and the power of now. When everything comes to you in the most beautiful way, that you know that you know, the right thing will come at the right time. The thoughts will come at the right time. And this, as I said, comes with mastering your mind and being in the now.
Being present to what's happening. Like even when scrolling past the questions, it's the right question will show up when it has to. So yes, we have this lovely comment from Rahil. He says, "I believe many of us have done many things in the past which we are not proud of. So we can't judge people on what they are doing now or next, considering their past." So true.
And isn't that the truth? You know, we tend to judge people, and isn't that an awful thing? We judge people of how they're behaving in the moment. And yet, if you see somebody who's angry and you say, oh my goodness, they're an angry person. No, they're angry in that moment, because ask yourself, have you ever been angry? Of course you have, and people will judge you in that moment. So again, you know, people are not their behavior. They're just behaving in maybe an unresourceful manner at that time. So when you realize that, it helps you, you know, switch off that judgment factor. And of course, when you're judging other people, well, you know, again, it's another trigger to start learning about your own self-awareness, your own insecurities. And look, we all have this. I mean, you know, you want to feel bad, scroll through Facebook or Instagram and see everybody's brilliant lives. And it's like,
Gosh, yes, gosh, yes. Uh, um, I know we're just 3 minutes away from the hour. Carol, would it be okay if I asked you just one more question?
Oh, ask as many as you like.
Oh, all right then. Yeah, careful what you say. I can go on forever. But, you know, we talk about judging others, but what about the times we're judging ourselves?
Oof.
Right? Because we're looking at others and judging, yes, but often we're also judging ourselves as because someone might have said something to us, or we might have not been able to live up to our own expectations. So how do you then deal with yourself?
That comes almost back round to a full circle. And one of the questions you asked at the beginning, you know, how do we, you know, begin to accept ourselves? And that old question of how do you learn to love yourself? And quite frankly, no amount of looking in the mirror going, I love you, I love you, I love you, means that you do. And, you know, we crave love. We crave attention from other people. And this is why we, you know, want to be out there on social media and say, look at me, look at me. Because we cannot look at ourselves. We're a harshest judgment. And, you know, in relationships, you know, we want somebody to love us. And so we put that onus, we put that responsibility on someone else. But actually, just think about this. When you're in love with somebody, or you say they're in love with you, really, all they're engendering is for you to find the love within yourself. And what happens when somebody leaves you? We say they've taken the love away. I don't feel loved anymore. How can that be when nobody else is responsible for loving you except yourself? And until you can learn to love and accept yourself, you'll attract relationships and situations that hold up the mirror and reflect that. And that's part of the beautiful learning and lessons of this life. And it comes round to the liberation when you do accept yourself. And the example I gave of David Icke, ridiculed mercilessly to the point where he doesn't care anymore. It doesn't mean you don't care, but you don't worry about being judged because you know who you are and what you stand for. Now, that doesn't come overnight. Because we've been to school, in society, in a job, there's certain ways to behave that people say you have to do this, you have to do that. And, we have been taught, our name, our religion, our race, sent to school. We've been taught, we've been programmed to conform. And so it really is experimenting and liberating. I'm reminded of, have you ever been to a 5 rhythms class?
No.
They don't call it dance. It's 5 rhythms. It was created by a wonderful dancer and woman called Gabrielle Roth. And they play incredible music. And you move any way you want and move your body in different ways because, again, emotion can get stored and stuck in the body. And I don't go very often, but when I have gone, it's so liberating. And I used to be a semi-professional dancer, so to move is just so liberating. It's like when you use your voice, but we're not given permission. And I have some friends who say, "Oh, I don't know how you go there." Now, of course, when you first go, you're kind of like, do, you're very cautious. And then you start thinking, "Oh, what the hell?" And you start finding your moves or look at somebody else and think, "Oh, that's nice." And you start experimenting. So it comes back to the experiment. It comes back to liberating your voice. And here's the other thing I find with a lot of people that I work with some of the interventions that I do. People say, I'm getting teary, I'm going to cry. And I always go for bring it on. There's nobody else in the house. Nobody can hear you. Cry. We don't cry. When, we're taught to be, I was speaking to a friend about this today, when somebody passes over or makes their transition of consciousness, that's how I like to refer to it. We just stoically back to work, get on with things. And we don't go through any process where, what are children taught? Boys don't cry, be strong, they're there, don't cry. And I always like to give permission for people to cry. And so here's something also to think about. Life isn't flatlined unless you're on antidepressants, and sadly too many people are on antidepressants. It is, it sways around. So it's about being kind to yourself and realizing that in those down times, we label sadness and anger as bad. Yet sadness can lead to deep introspection. And I know in my life when I've had times where I thought, I'm just not feeling great. I am sad. And sometimes I don't even know about what, but I'm just having a little fug. I'm just a little bit down. And I just think, okay, I'm going to go into this. I'm just going to kind of like mope and have a day of mopidity. And I give myself permission to do that.
Yeah.
So this is about, liberating yourself from we can't do that, or we can't do that. And saying, well, what would happen if I did?
Yeah.
What would happen if I did? Being curious.
True.
And giving permission to yourself. And then discovering who you really are, taking off the layers, the masks, and discovering more of who you are. And again, this is a lot of the work that I do, helping people discover more of who they really are and less of who they're not. So this is the possibility hub, breaking the boundaries of who you believe yourself to be, and truly opening the door to new possibilities. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yes, that would definitely be wonderful. you can't leave us by just telling us that little bit about the Possibilities Hub. Please tell us a little bit more. What
Well,
is it?
Ruqya, I do so many different things. From what happened last year was I'm part of the Association of Transformational Leaders. And when I was introducing myself to this new group, there were so many things that I do, whether it's, from NLP, I also work with an indigenous medicine, I also do this and I do that, and firewalking and fire ceremonies, and I have so many interests. And, I thought, gosh, that's going to go in one ear and out the other. So I wanted to amalgamate everything that epitomizes what I'd love to be able to create for other people, which is possibilities. And so I had 3 websites. I had one website for my speaker profile. I had one website for and another website for all the weird stuff I did. So I created the Possibility Hub, and I didn't put 3 websites into one. It's quite sparse, but there's the Mind Hub, the Spirit Hub, the Business Hub, there's the Media Hub. And so it encompasses opening and helping people find new possibilities. So there's the podcast, which I started last year. There's my video channels, and I've come across some really, really unusual people. And actually, one of the people I saw on your opening media was Viola Edwards. She's also part of the Association of Transformational Leaders. She's in Cyprus, and she's an amazing woman. Really amazing woman and a wonderful story. So it was lovely to see her there. So again, the philosophy behind the Possibility Hub is literally, to break through the boundaries of who you believe yourself to be and open the door to new possibilities, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, to become the true genius, the brilliance that you really are, rather than the box that society has placed us in, to kind of like break free and say, I'm me.
Yes, I'm me. I like that. Love it. Thank you, Carol. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing with us. It was beautiful having this conversation with you. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough for the person.
And Ruqya, I must say, thank you for creating this wonderful platform, for always showing up and smiling, and every day and bringing something new to the table, and inviting me to be part of this. I'm truly honored, and I honor and see the beautiful, beautiful woman you are.
Thank you, Carol. Love you too. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great rest of the evening, rest of the day, wherever you are in the world, catching us on live and on replay. Thank you so much, and bye for now.